disregard. It was spoken honestly, unvarnished, and without rage. Regarding the first time, Julian opened out to a woman who had a profound impact on his life. His remarks astounded the world. I detested her to my core. Julian Lennon. Silent wounds. Lennon Julian was quite little when his mother Cynthia and father John Lennon abandoned them to spend time with Ono. Yet Beatles fans were horrified by this revelation, and it had an impact on Julian sincerely. The headlines and the band didn't matter to him. He was wounded by his father's desertion, at a time when he needed parental love, support, and guidance. Julian was left without them. Most desired it, because the author's parents separated when he was a little boy. His early years were characterized by perplexity, emptiness, and a lot of unsolved questions. Although Julian had a distinct personality from John Lennon, who was admired for his heartfelt songs and serene demeanor. Viewpoint. He believed that Lennon had deserted his family, that his father had not been around to watch him grow up, and that he had offered direction or offered consolation in trying circumstances. Julian's attention was diverted from the Beatles' breakup or the public's fixation on rumors about famous people. Rather, he suffered from his father's choice to part ways with him. This suffering left an emotional scar that never went away, completely vanished. When Julian thought about his background, he was unable to understand how a parent might desert their child. This persistent query shaped his personality and had an impact on how he became as an adult. His mother Cynthia had to cope with the fallout. She assumed the responsibilities of both a mother and guardian, preventing her son from experiencing the agony of being left behind due to their limited financial resources and lack of a lavish lifestyle. They had a difficult time in life. Anticipate from a well-known musician's family, Cynthia did everything she could to guarantee her son's safety and security. She even abandoned sentimental items that were inherited from her family in order to provide Julian with clothing, food, and education. Her sacrifices prepared the way for his destiny, and her love gave him strength. Julian had to face an unfriendly and challenging world. He had much more experiences at school, difficulties because they believed he led an affluent and opulent life. Some of his classmates were jealous of him, as John, the son of John Lennon. But this was untrue, and their presumptions resulted in Julian was treated cruelly. He was subjected to bullying, which included physical abuse, taunting, and mockery. Assaulted by those who believed he had more than they did. In actuality, he only possessed a well-known name that did not help him the ease they had envisioned. Throughout these years, Julian strengthened his inner fortitude. From an early age, he comprehended thought. Although things may appear one way, they may actually be different. Notoriety and riches, which many people want, don't necessarily provide security or happiness. Julian noticed at beneath the glitzy exterior of celebrity life and identified the underlying emotions of loneliness, and John Lennon was revered by the public as a representation of love and peace. But Julian maintained an alternative view. His father's revered persona did not fit with the serenity sense of emptiness he felt at home. As he grew older, his first perception of his thoughts and feelings regarding his father began to be influenced by unfairness. He saw more than simply well-known musicians, legends, or activists. Rather, he witnessed a man who had deserted his previous family and revealed a new side to his son. Julian was constantly torn about this, and it played an important role in his life narrative. When Julian was a teenager, his relationship with John was still not excellent. They didn't communicate much after the divorce, and when they did, it felt uneasy. They would occasionally meet in person or speak on the phone, but it lacked authenticity. John's attention was on his new relationship with Yoko Ono and their Sean, his son, making Julian feel even more abandoned. He looked at his dad, assuming the role of a loving absent parent to Sean. John was perceived by others as a man who had many people found it endearing that he quit his job to raise his youngest son, but for it was a source of suffering. Julian, he had never known the love of his father. Similarly, Sean and Julian were clearly treated differently, which had a significant negative influence on their tense relationship connection. Julian was always candid about the distinction. Afterwards, he highlighted what he perceived to be his father's duplicitous public persona. According to him, John Lennon's sermons on peace, love, and unity to the globe, but left his first kid behind and wife to get by on their own. The disparity between John's statements and his actions were too significant to ignore. One unpleasant memory that lingered for Julian was an allegedly cruel remark created by his dad. According to his father, Julian was conceived from a drunken error. On the other hand, love gave birth to his brother Sean. If the whether or not the comment was entirely true, Julian was profoundly impacted. The words represented a split in their relationship, reminding Julian of his frequent feelings of unlove. Despite all of the sadness, there were some joyful times. When John was enjoying a vacation in the 1970s, he was encouraged to spend time with Julian by Yoko, a woman named May Pang. They were able to connect at this time. Julian received a guitar and drum set from John Presents, but the most significant thing was the time they shared. They listened to music, enjoyed each other's company, and Julian was able to experience fatherhood for the first time. For him, the recollections held unique meaning. A lot. They were short, but important. Despite the distance, they demonstrated John's concern. But when John returned to Yoko, and all communication stopped, there was quiet once more between them. There were hints of hope by the time Julian was about 15. John would occasionally call from New York. He performed a brand new song titled Just Like Starting Over during one call for Julian on the phone. Both the song's optimism and his father's joy were audible to Julian. For an instant, it appeared as though there could be a chance to make their relationship better, but that hope was fragile and was taken from Julian too soon. In December 1980, tragically, John Lennon was put to death in a senseless act of violence. Worldwide, the community lamented the renowned musician and activist's passing. The evening that Julian's father passed away forever, the world was altered on the cold night of December 8, 1980 forever, outside a calm Manhattan building in New York City. John Lennon passed away tragically. Later that day, he had welcomed a young man outside his house and gave him a signed record. Nobody realized that later a guy named Mark David Chapman would brutally end his life. John arrived home late after making a recording. Upon exiting his vehicle, Chapman, who had been waiting, then unexpectedly fired 4 revolver shots into his back. This one of the most gifted musicians was silenced by a horrible deed. 10 minutes later, John Lennon was declared dead at a medical center. People all throughout the world were shocked by the news, which traveled swiftly. The following day, fans woke up in shock, trying to comprehend how such a well-known and adored singer could be put to death close to his house. Outside, a group of individuals gathered and began to cry in silence. Yoko Ono, widow of Jay Ono, declared that there would be no funeral. Rather, she asked that in remembrance of Jay, the people keep spreading the word about his lifelong pursuit of peace. As individuals, while everyone else was depressed, a young child named Julian Lennon in North Wales was terribly saddened by the passing of a well-known individual. The eldest son is Julian of John Lennon, though not as evident as the millions of followers in grief. His pain was nonetheless very real. After returning from boarding school, Julian was residing with his mother, Cynthia, in the tiny hamlet of Ruth. He was thrilled to see his father again and was glad to be home. A few days prior, John had called him from New York previously, and he had a friendly, animated voice. While on the phone, John played Like a Fresh Start, a new song from his double fantasy album. Julian grinned. He expressed his admiration for the song to his father. For Julian, it was a unique moment of bonding since he sensed his father's vitality and joy. After years, they felt for the first time optimistic. They thought that the obstacles brought forth by years of silence and separation might vanish. They had hoped that they would be able to get back together as father and son. One night, Julian was asleep in their Castle Street attic chamber when he abruptly woke up, not because the phone was ringing, but rather because his room's chimney fell, sending bricks tumbling into thick darkness. This unanticipated incident appeared to represent a significant change in his life, as though everything he was familiar with was disintegrating. Not long after, he learned that his dad was no longer there. John's voice was excited as he spoke, the last time Julian heard it, about life, music, and fresh starts. However, that voice is now permanently lost. Julian has a clear memory of their chats. Not only were they the last ones, but they also suggested a future that never materialized. His thoughts of a different version of their connection will never go away, one in which they mended old wounds, laughed, and made up. Regretfully, that fact will never come to pass. John's music, his legacy, and the unresolved issues are all that remain. Affection shared by a father and his son, while individuals grieved John's passing. The emphasis looked to Yoko and his younger son Sean, who had lived out his latter years with his dad. Sean was fortunate enough to experience his father's love and delight every day when he woke up directly. Julian, on the other hand, only remembered the quick phone call and the estrangement calls, and now the sobering truth of his father's death. Following the catastrophe, Julian felt a grief of a different sort. Upon reading John's will, it revealed a terrible reality. Everything was turned over to Yoko, including and more than $200 million estate. Julian didn't inherit anything directly, simply a £100,000 trust fund. This seems inconsequential in light of Thenemo's fortune from John's own music, the Beatles' hits, and continuing royalties. The money wasn't the only thing that upset Julian. The most painful thing was his father did not mention him in his testament. Observing that everything had been handed away to others, leaving him with very little, exacerbated the suffering of his early years. It had nothing to do with money. It was about being accepted as his father's child and feeling like he belonged. The gap between his life and Sean's was widening. Over time, Sean was showered with love from John, and his Julian hoped for the same in later years. As the estate's executive, Yoko kept everything that belonged to John out of Julian's grasp. Julian gradually began to feel more and more omitted. In the end, he made a decision that would significantly affect his adult life. Julian made the decision to defend what he felt was properly his and fight back. A lawsuit against the estate was initiated by him, which became a battle that lasted for almost 2 decades. The trip was difficult and draining. People frequently didn't comprehend the rationale behind his actions. It appeared to others that he was merely pursuing his father's fortune. However, in actuality, money wasn't his only driving force. Julian attempted to recover a portion of his history. He wanted the instruments, messages, and private items that brought up memories of his dad. Regardless of how tense their relationship was, these were symbols of it. Had been. The lengthy, intense negotiations took a long time. The battle took an emotional toll on him, but he persisted because he wanted to leave his stamp on his father's legacy. Finally, an agreement was reached in the mid-1990s. A reported $20,000 was given to Julian. Million. Although it provided him with security and stability, it was unable to take away the anguish of having to defend his beliefs. Ought to have been his from the start. Although he gained independence via the legal agreement, it did not bring Jim a serenity. The items left and the memories lost could not be replaced by wealth, hidden, or the years spent apart. Brothers in Lennon's shadow, Julian and Sean Lennon, have developed a bond despite having distinct upbringings and recollections of John Lennon. Solid and sincere connection. Although they didn't always have a strong bond as kids, they were impacted by separation, loss, and mutual comprehension. This relationship did not form instantly. Rather, it evolved over time. The sons of a well-known person, they managed to survive. Julian had a constant brung as a result of his father's early abandonment. Growing up, he could only see John Lennon in the distant through other people's stories, TV, and newspapers. He yearned for his dad's presence, but it didn't feel real. In contrast, Shaw and Yasuo Ono were constantly in John's presence, making Julian feel empty. This distinction left Julian with a deep wound that might have prompted him to become resentful. Sean possessed a distinct upbringing. His early years were characterized by the love of his father, their ushering a reminder of John Lennon's presence. In contrast to Julian, Sean felt trished and near his family. But in December 1980, everything changed when his father died unexpectedly. Sean's life was forever changed by this loss. He realized that life would never be full. The differences between Sean and Julian were bleak. One was used to being far away, and the other was used to being near. While one experienced the agony of longing, the other felt the shock of sudden loss. These distinctions might have kept them apart forever, but instead they assert a kind of comprehension. In their own way, each of them understands what it was like to live under Lennon's tyrannical grip. Both of them felt the weight of people's preoccupation with their families, the incessant comparisons, and the difficulty of paving their own paths while carrying a legacy they did not choose. They grew closer over time as a result of their shared struggles, since they didn't have many childhood memories in common. Their friendship wasn't created by such experiences. Rather, it evolved out of their silent recognition that they both bore burdens that most people to understand. There was a momentous occasion in 2006. Julian visited Sean's performance in Paris. It changed when he saw his younger brother perform for the first time. Something within him, Julian, saw beyond their father's influence when he saw Sean perform. Additionally, he observed Sean's displaying talent. They became closer as a result of this encounter. The following, during Sean's 2007 tour, Julian spent more time with him, though their time together was straightforward yet important. It assisted in partially repairing the gap brought about by years spent apart. Moments of the past distance gradually gave way to unity, happiness, and respect for one another. Julian began to feel pleased and defending his brother. He spoke fondly of Sean on a regular basis, and his love for his younger self inspired his decision to keep a positive relationship with Yasuo Ono. Sibling it would be impossible for Julian to harm. Sean 2021 saw the screening of Julian and Sean sat together and viewed rare video of their performance in the Beatles' Get Back documentary in London. John Lennon's father at the studio. When they first saw John Lennon, he was fun, hilarious, and very imaginative. This was how he saw his father. Revolutionary for Julian because it allowed him to re-establish a connection with a vision of his father that he had gradually lost. During those hours, the resentment he had against his father subsided and was replaced by a softer kind of affection. Distributing for Julian, this encounter with Sean added even more significance. Today, both there are various ways that brothers honor their father. Julian uses photography, music, and other forms of expression to preserving his father's inventiveness through storytelling. Sean is employed behind the scenes by overseeing portions of John Lennon's creative endeavors and music library in order to preserve his father's legacy. Has a worldwide readership. Despite the constant difficulty of becoming connected to them, have managed to wear the Lennon name with dignity. Instead of it used to separate them, but now serves as a common link that binds them together. Julian has encountered a lot of hardships in his life, yet he has consistently demonstrated resilience. He has had challenging circumstances since he was young, and these have caused emotional scars that have persisted. Despite these difficulties, he has occasionally found peace and contentment, particularly in his close bond with his brother Shaw, which has made him very happy and satisfied. Sean has gone through his own journey of grief and fortitude. Even despite having a different childhood than Julian, he can relate to the constant comparisons. Because of their common circumstances, the brothers have bonded. They are powerless to alter what has occurred in the past, but they have created a loving and respectful present in its place. Distance and resentment, a silent excursion outside of the Beatles. Many people believe that the Beatles kids would be well versed in the band's history. The Beatles were an innovative group that altered the music landscape, and their tale continues to captivate audiences worldwide. Nevertheless, Julian Lennon, who is the first son of John Lennon, has shown that this isn't always the case. As a matter of fact, he frequently feels excluded from band news. Julian recently discussed his life and career with a British newspaper. Although he is regarded as the son of John Lennon, Julian has forged a career apart from his father's well-known band.